Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our new fall session of the TAG Talks. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm Georgia Christa, TAG's event coordinator, and we are very happy to have in this evening with us Ettore Maria Mazzola to present his talk for an inheritable city and not just a seemingly sustainable one. Ettore Maria Mazzola is a Roman-based architect, urbanist, conservator, painter, and author of several essays and books. Ettore is the vice president of Architettura Urbanistica Tradizionale, member of the Committee for Urbanism of Italia Nostra, member of INBAU Italy, member of the board of Making Cities Livable, and also a member of the Cultural Institute Gruppo dei Romanisti. In 2006, he has been member of the International Scientific Committee for the Revisited Venice Charter, which we hope to be revisited again very soon. In addition to the numerous conservation projects implemented in Rome and in urban and architectural projects developed in Italy, Ettore has carried out several projects for new residence and primary and secondary schools in Moscow regions in collaboration with the architect Maxim Atayans. His urban projects have been the recipient of several awards or honorable mentions. In 2016, he has been invited by the UNESCO as one of the 500 international personalities called for giving suggestions, thoughts, and sketches for the reconstruction of Syria. As usual, the talk will be followed by a session of questions and answers. If you have questions during the talk, please type your questions on the message bar at the bottom of the screen, and after the talk, I will invite you to unmute your microphone and ask directly your questions. The stage is yours now, Ettore, and thank you again very much for offering us this very exciting talk. If you would like to share your screen, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Georgia, and thank you all for attending. I tried not annoying you. I'm going to explain the reason why of this title in this specific moment when we are abusing with words like sustainability. I thought that it would be necessary to understand and clarify what we claim to be sustainability and what could be a real sustainability. So let me share my screen. Can you see that? Is it visible?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, great. So I'd like to start with this quotation of Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn." Because these projects I'm going to explain today in some way take in consideration this way of learning and especially the way of involving people. Many times there is some tendency in imposing decision without dealing with the people, and many times we never learn from our mistakes. So this means that we need to have some kind of intro, okay, that has to start much earlier than nowadays, simply to understand how much we never learn from our mistakes. If we simply take the plan of Rome at the end of Roman Empire, we had almost 2 million of inhabitants that were living in 13.55 square kilometers. And the city then had a contraction in the Middle Ages with the abandon of the city. And before the unification of Italy, when in 1748 Giovan Battista Nolli drew his fantastic plan of Rome, made a perfect survey, the city was only a city of 150,000 of inhabitants. It was concentrated in the Campus Martius. The city then had an explosion after the unification of Italy in 1873. And what we have is that a city that was only of 400,000 of inhabitants was already bigger than the city where almost 2 million of inhabitants used to live in the late Roman Empire. And this is something that was also a drama for the city and for the state in general, because thanks to this the way of developing the city, it was also a bankruptcy of the Comune di Roma and obviously of the state due to the way the private investor were making the city and were making the profit while the costs were all of the public. This brought the Prime Minister Giolitti in the end of, well, in 1909, thinking at the unwise way the politician before the collapse of the Vatican State misunderstood what was going on, and they were not smart enough to purchase the land in order to make a good, grandiose, he said, expansion and excellent investment. Due to the bankruptcy later on, as Italo Insolera recognized, the city administration with Ernesto Nathan, the mayor of 1907, realized that the only way to get out of the crisis was to become part of that business. But then, unfortunately, especially in the fascist time, this was forgotten. They went back to the way of giving all the money to the private investors and use the state only as a wallet to pay the bill. The master plan of 1909 that was designed for a population of 1 million of inhabitants, as you can see, was at least 4 times bigger than the city, the red one in the slide, where up to 1.7 million of inhabitants used to live. Worse than that was the city plan for 2 million of inhabitants during the fascist time, that made some land consumption that was insane. It is 10 times bigger than the one where almost 2 million of inhabitants used to live at the end of Roman Empire. And probably the ancients were much more intelligent than ours, because they knew the importance of the respect of the countryside. They knew the needs of reducing as much as possible the costs of maintenance of cities like this. But today, when we claim to be the most intelligent and the most evolved generation on this planet, we have a city that is almost 3 million of inhabitants, that is distributed on 1,287 square kilometers. And just to give you an idea, the city of almost 2 million of inhabitants at the end of Roman Empire was the little spot you have in the center here. And the Comune di Roma, it's very happy. These are pictures taken from the website of the Comune di Roma. They like to show that within the perimeter of Rome, you can have Bologna, Milano, Napoli, Torino, Catania, Firenze, Genoa, Palermo, and more. And this is something that is absolutely crazy. These are the dimension of all the municipalities within the Comune di Roma. And all this is a propaganda that is aimed at obviously obtaining money from the state to make investment. But at the end, what we have is that the city of Rome has such sad aspects of abandon, with vegetation that is growing spontaneously on sidewalks, streets that are plenty of holes. And this is because obviously when you have such a kind of land like this is Rome. Obviously, the way of maintaining everything in a good shape, it's impossible. There are no money to cut, to trim the trees. And sometimes there are branches of trees that are falling and are killing people. And this is not affecting only Rome, not only Lazio, but is affecting the whole country. These are estimations that are possible to be found online on the web. And we have some land consumption in 2020 that reached 57 square kilometers. That means 2 square meters per second. And those numbers are really scaring, because we have a country that is 300 to square kilometers, but 21,000 square kilometers are paved. And this is not good. This land consumption in the last 8 years costed 3 billions of euro per year. These are crazy numbers. And what is even more crazy is the fact that there are studies that have been done all around the world. This is a study of 2011 made in the United States that explain very well how the paved surface can worsen the air quality, because the circulation, the humidity, it is changing, and this is making our planet warmer and warmer. So we are afraid of climate change, but we don't do anything serious to do this. Eventually, we are even worsening that. We will see in a while. If we take in consideration the European Environmental Agency data, these are those of 2010, now are even worse, we can see that the highest consumption of energy and the highest production of CO2 is because of buildings. Buildings for houses and for commerce, more than industry, more than transportation. If we take also other data of the European Environmental Agency, we discover that what is here defined edificio tradizionale is not the traditional building, the historical building, but is the current way of building, with the hollow bricks, with the light walls, with the steel and concrete and glass. And these are those buildings that are extremely dangerous for our planet. And then those that are claiming to work in sustainability, instead of taking in consideration seriously the instruction of the European Environmental Agency about the life cycle assessment, are simply focusing on the phase of the exercise of the building. So they don't care about the extraction from the quarry, the transportation to the place where they are transformed, the process of transformation, the transportation for the construction, and at the end of the life of a building, they don't care about the cost for the transportation and the transportation in a dump and then what is going on. This is something that is honestly enough. We need to do something, also because of what we define bio LEED architecture is generally something that has nothing to do with the real world. It's what we can define some greenwash. This is a very popular building built in Milan by the architect Boeri that was so successful, was so advertised, and then is the Bosco Verticale. He got a commission in China to build a city for 2 million inhabitants, all like this, and there are a lot of emulators. But at the end, if someone knew the true story of this building, the illegal way it has been approved to be houses for with some low-cost rental or cost policy for young couples has been transformed with the super expensive buildings where only for the condo cost every month people are spending up to 2,000 euros. And this is something that is also obliging people to turn on the lights 24 hours a day because of all these massive vegetation that is planting the different in the different loggias. But obviously there is another problem. Trees need roots. The architect is generally in love with his screen, and he's deeply believing what he can see on the screen of his computer, forgetting that the trees need roots. This is what is happening on the streets where roots are suffering, or when someone is making excavation to put the new electric line or a wire or fiber or whatever, or simply because the wind is and the pavement that is making the roots not breathing is killing the trees, and the wind is is provoking these things. So in the Bosco Verticale, they spent a fortune to install a series of titanium cables to keep the trees standing. Then it's necessary to think about who can go up to those skyscraper and trim the leaves. But this idea of the vegetation over the building is very popular. So this is a way on the Polytechnic of the University of Milano, they decided to have gardens, orchards on the roofs, and they died, obviously, with the climate. But it's necessary also to think about that the vegetation. It's positive for our world if roots are planted on the real ground, on the ground, and not on a slab of concrete where you have some ground for the roots. But it's very popular. So Boeri made also this project for the new polyclinic in Milan, which is in reality a big shopping mall with attached also the hospital, and it is presented as a very sustainable because of all this vegetation on the roof. That means over a slab of concrete, not on the ground. But we also have solutions that are thinking at vertical lawns, forgetting that plants and nature decided that those plants must grow horizontally and not vertically. So those that are selling these materials are obviously saying that this is something that needs some, first of all, aluminum substructure, which is not very sustainable, and then they need a sophisticated integrated fertigation system, which is not very healthy since fertigation means chemistry, that means pollution. This is the way many of these vertical lawn works, but it's very popular in the schools of architecture. They are pushing to do those things. And then what we have is this ridiculous situation. For instance, a very famous professor of La Sapienza who made the subway station of Santa Emerenziana on the Via Nomentana, roughly in Rome. He made these green walls with this vertical lawn, and the grass died. And so one morning, were electing time, the mayor of those days decided to ask this little guy to spray some green to make the green back green since it was dead. Now, obviously, that green is no longer there. They learn from this system that is used in some shopping mall in the United States. But we like to consider these things sustainable. One of the funniest, very recent things happened in Rome is the presentation of these painted pavement with a very bad kind of paintings by an artist who said that she used a photocatalytic and air purifying paints, which has the same effect of planting 12 trees. Now, I'm wondering if it is better to have this or the trees, and also it's necessary to check if this is really purifying the air. But we like to, invent a story, and people like to believe in these stupid things. The Same Comune di Roma promoted this terrible project along Via dei Fori Imperiali, where it has been proposed this horrible shelter and a series of slab of concrete and wooden pavements, which are going to last very, very soon. And they said that this is something that is going to be very healthy for Via dei Fori Imperiali, and is going to create some shadows for the visitors. It's a pity that before doing this, they destroyed all the trees that used to be along Via dei Fori Imperiali. They invented that they are dead standing trees. In reality, those trees were in a very good shape, but they were fighting with some project that was going on, including the idea of having the railway, the subway passing under Via dei Fori Imperiali and having a stop in Piazza Venezia. That probably will be never done since too many archaeological findings have been founded there. So We are talking constantly of green transition, and we impose in some way the presence of wind turbines. Italy is suffering a lot for all these wind turbines. And we have this new landscape that is quite scaring, which apparently wants to produce clean energy. Obviously, it's necessary, again, not to see the turbine in function, but anything that is before and after the construction of and the installation of these things. But in any case, those things are built thanks to the funds offered by the European community that are subsidizing those that are installing those things. And so those things are extremely intense, even if the distance, the optimal distance that has been well calculated by the John Hopkins University says that the right distance is 15 diameters of the rotor, but the average we have actually 7 diameters because you receive some funds not because of the energy you're producing, but because of the number of turbine you install. And many of these are also not working. And to install one of these wind turbine, we need 5,000 square meters of land and 600 tons of iron and cement. And obviously, this is something that is totally impermeable. Obviously, there are a lot of demonstration against the installation of this structure, and there is constantly there are people that are protesting for this. Then we also have the same situation with the photovoltaic system, and we are changing our countryside in this terrible manner. We have no longer crops, but we have these new crops, or we have these new trees, or we have these things in France, because it's not only Italy suffering for this, this is Portugal. And then we have also side effect for this, because obviously when we no longer have roots, when we no longer have trees, when we no longer have the right way of our planet to breathe, we can have the floods and a lot of people are dying. We can have the landslides and a lot of people can die. And our politicians that are those that are promoting the installation of all these green installation are remembering the tragedy only when there is a funeral and they have to appear on TV showing that they cry in some church. And this is something that is really totally unsustainable. But there are other things that we are doing without learning from our mistakes, our other consequences of the way we are designing cities and we're building cities, because we're killing the sense of belonging, not only in the countryside, but especially in the cities. And we are creating criminogenic architecture that is destroying the local identities. And then this is Paris. And then you have the problem of the French banlieues, for instance. And it's funny that in 1870, Paris suffered the same problems, and they didn't learn from the mistakes made on those days, producing this kind of dormer district. But we are so smart today that we decide also to no longer use our legs. So this is a group of kids in Villa Borghese that is using segways, and the city is completely invaded by tourists that are moving on the segways instead of using their legs. And they don't understand that the Disney made this movie, which is one of the greatest lessons to humans today, that is talking about is Wall-E, the movie, and he's talking about the humans that have polluted the planet and they are forced now to live on a spaceship, sitting on these floating chairs, and when finally they can come back on the planet because the mini robot inform them that the life is back because there is a leaf on a plant, the first things they have to do is to learn that they have legs. And this is what I define this is really what is probably our future. We believe to be smart using our cell phone to buy anything online. We can demand anything on the machine, the computer, because we don't have to do anything else than eating and watching stupid stuff on TV, probably. And at the end, it seems like our main aim is to become parasites. There are a lot of messages we are constantly receiving, but we have to ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? And at the end, probably now, if we want to approach only the argument from the architectural urbanistic point of view, we have to blame Le Corbusier with his idea of the radius when he imposed, obviously he was sponsored by the car producer Voisin, and so he was promoting the creation of this city where we must live 30 miles far from the place where we are working, because we need to have our cars. We must use them until they are worn out, grinding down roads, surfaces, gears, burning up oil and gasoline, everything that is needed for a huge amount of work, enough for everyone. Obviously, the power of industry obviously was impossible to be fought by the craftsmanship, and he was successful in Europe. But on the other side of the ocean, also the theory of Broadacre City of Frank Lloyd Wright made the same terrible, terrible decision, terrible theory. And obviously, the car industry took advantage of this theory to make people addicted on car and consuming land. And at the end, we produce places like this. I'd like to define the Depressopoli, depressing city, or we have the Villetopoli, which is a single family home cities, or we have the Spaghettopoli, which is the spaghetti city. And then we have other important message we have to take in consideration, because in English, the book of Tom Wolfe was called From Bauhaus to Our House, but in Italian has been translated Damn Architects. And then there is another interesting book written by this Italian author. There is in English, the title is Architects Should Be Killed When They Are Baby, and this is a practical guide to home renovation without getting ulcers. This is not good advertising for our job. And so we need to remember another fantastic quotation of Benjamin Franklin, who said, "We are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid." And unfortunately, this is what we do. After the pandemic, a lot of money were offered to relaunch countries. And in Italy, instead of investing on health, because one of the tragedy was the consequence of closing so many hospitals, so many intensive care rooms, because obviously there is this idea of dismantling public health and oblige people to become addicted on private health and obviously assurance companies. At the end, the only lesson to be learned from the pandemic was that probably was necessary to invest on a thing like that. But then if we take a look at the way the billions offered to Italy were used, we can see that 31% was for infrastructure and sustainable mobility. Obviously, sustainable is an abused word. Only 28% to education and research. A lot of money, 46.3 to digitalization and innovation. Healthcare only 19.8, then inclusion and cohesion 27.7, and green revolution and transitional ecological transition 69.3. Obviously, for the green revolution, we need to see what does it mean carefully. Then after this were other funds, those of the PNRR, which is the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And even here, where we have some division more clear, we can see that green revolution and ecological transition is 68 billions, which is 27% of the total. Digitalization and innovation, competitiveness and culture is 19.8, that means 49 billions. education and research only 12.8, infrastructure and sustainability and mobility 12.6, other specifics, which we don't know what does it mean, clearly it's 10%, inclusion and cohesion 9%, and healthcare only 7.4%, which means that those money are very good to be spent, no matter what is the results, because at the end, the only thing we need is good system of education, culture, healthcare, but these are not that important. But there is something more important, and this is the reason why I made this book that is going to come soon, is the imposition, let's say the calendar planned by the COP26, COP27, COP28, that makes mandatory by 2030 to improve the existing buildings in terms of energy and become zero emission soon. And this is something that is very, very close. But how we do this today? The way that is proposed is the one of making these panels, which are obviously industrial. Obviously, they are suffering of a very, very short life. They are suffering now also because there are the birds that are making holes to build their nests inside. There are a lot of pictures online you can find very funny. And then what we have is this. They're falling down. The wind is many times destroying these things, which are not changing anything in better. Also because those panels, those that made the law to propose the installation of these panels, didn't oblige to make a perfect survey of the building and make a calculation to test if this kind of intervention is going to change the thermohygrometric behavior of the building. They are just focusing on the thermal behavior, not the hygrometric behavior. So all the buildings where this kind of installation have been done are now plenty of condensation inside, and condensation is a perfect to become sick because of asthma. But then these panels are also easy to be burned. These are images of the tragedy of the skyscraper in Milan that was just finished and it was totally burned. And we have many, many different cases. So just to conclude, after this critical reading of what we define sustainability, I'd like to introduce this proposal I made, which need another preface. I spent a lot of time and I made a lot of publication in the last 21 years on making research on the development of my country after the unification of Italy. And I discovered so many incredibly wise laws, tools that used to be used until 1926, roughly, because the so-called leggi fascistissime of 1925-1926 are those that cancel this possibility. And this is the new book that is coming soon, which has the same title of this conference, where I put together all these studies. This is a caricature I drew with as you can see, the portrait of many architects from the 30s of last century to nowadays, with the background of all the books of Le Corbusier, which were a fiasco. But now I think it's necessary to think about, again, the quotation I made at the beginning of Giolitti and the one of Insolera that was quoting Ernesto Nathan. Because probably if we watch at the current city, which is a problem, as a glass that is half full instead of a half empty, probably we can understand that we can do a lot to change the life quality of those living in cities, but also a lot for the countryside. If we take a picture of Rome from the satellite, the same height, the historical center It's a place where you have an incredible density, but this density, it is accompanied with a series of piazze, a network of piazze and piazzette that are inviting to the stroll or gathering people, while in the suburbia, in a very recent district on the Via Laurentina, it's possible to see this worm-like building with a lot of voids around. And all these voids are spaces that were at the end mandatory to be left because of the standard and the urban law that were approved starting from 1942 with the Legge Urbanistica. And so we produced a monster building, and here I'm going to show you in this presentation these two projects I made for the regeneration of this monster building 1 kilometer long in Rome, that is the Corviale, and the other monster district that looks like a jail, that is the Zen district in Palermo, both designed by very famous architects, because while the first one is Mario Fiorentino, another professor of La Sapienza, the one of Palermo was designed by Vittorio Gregotti and other important architects. But what is funny, if we don't want to cry, it's better to laugh, is that in July 15, on July 15 of 1972, it was destroyed, the Prutigo, and it was destroyed because it was considered unlivable environment, half for his low-income residents. And Charles Jenks said that that was the death of those utopia. But we are smart, and 5 days after the death of these utopia, we decided to build the Corviale, which is a place 1 kilometer long with the balcony houses where roughly 6,500 inhabitants are living. And on the fourth floor, it was no rooms because it was decided to have the shops on the fourth floor. Obviously, nobody had the courage to open there some shop. I made some evaluation taking from real data, and I discovered that it was necessary 7.5 years to have only 122 apartments ready. And the cost of construction were pretty high. I'm not going to annoy you with the numbers, but I'm going to summarize the meeting. But then I analyzed also a lot of social housing districts, which were mixed income, mixed function social housing districts. This is in Testaccio in Rome. And you can see that the quality is quite different. Even the way they were built, the time needed for building this building was incredible. This was Carlo Broggi in Testaccio. This is Quadrio Pirani. All these are social housing built with this criteria of mixed use, mixed income. This is Città Giardino Niene in Censo Sabatini. These are other buildings in Garbatella by Sabatini, Marconi, etc. These are beautiful intervention by Camillo Palmerini at the Appio district in Rome, all again social housing. Look at the incredible internal courtyard. These are the social housing Flaminio of 1926. These are other social housing in Palermo, because not only in Rome, they were building fantastic buildings. This is the district Matteotti. And so other things I analyzed was the kind of type and the time needed for the construction. And the real data shows that the house of San Saba in Rome, for instance, which are really beautiful, really durable, because they have never been restored since 1908 when they were built, took only 6 months to be built, 44 houses, only 6 months. If we think about the problem of the refugee today, it's a shame that we don't know how to solve the problem if we have these kind of examples to be taken in consideration. I made also, thanks to the data I found at the headquarters of the Istituto per le Case Popolari, I discovered the real bottom line cost and the bottom line time needed for the construction. And everything I can show you now, it costs much less than the Corviale monster, which when I was a student in the 80s in La Sapienza, I remember I was taught that that was the only way, the fastest and the cheapest way to solve the problem of housing, which is one of the greatest lie I heard as a student when I was, they tried to make some lobotomy. These are other houses, all social housing, and even in this case, the costs are always lower than those I shown you. wherever we go, we find these things. Then we have another example that is even more incredible, because this is the block that was built as a demonstrative district, demonstrative building in Garbatella in 1929. They gave 1 month for the design and 4 months for building these houses. And at the end, the costs were absolutely ridiculous compared to the cost is less than half than the cost of Corviale. And the time was incredibly fast. And these buildings never restored, now are on the real estate market for a very, very high cost. This is the master plan of this lot for this experimental demonstrative district. And these are the pictures immediately after the construction and all the plans of all these buildings. I will go fast. This is the one that then won the competition organized for that project. And the reason why those buildings were so fast is because on those days, the building technique that was used was the one that was well documented in the manual design, not only written, with the marvelous drawings by Carlo Formenti that was used in Rome, in Italy, but was used also in many countries abroad, for instance, in Argentina, where Brazil, where a larger Italian community used to live and used to build in this fantastic manner. These are the outstanding drawings made by Carlo Formenti that from the foundation to the scaffolding, to the arches, to the way of building foundation, the way of building walls, windows, anything is incredibly well, carefully designed. And as you can see, it shows also modern techniques of those days, because it was documenting also the technique that is using iron beams, H-shape iron beams, that in some way were working like wood, but were industrially produced and were allowing them to build, for instance, the typical system of floors, which is the one you can see on the bottom left, or actually on the upper right, but the one on the bottom left is the more sought after. On those days, all the buildings of Garbatella, those of Città Giardino, of San Saba, are built with these shallow vaults, which is something that is extremely fast to be done, because you must load the floors immediately after finishing the structure in order to check if there are movement. And the fast construction reduce the cost, because what is costing is not the material, but is labor. The longer is the site of construction, the higher are the costs. As you can see, other beautiful details made by Formenti. Recently, it has been an auction where one of the houses of San Saba, built in 6 months, have been sold. And as you can see, the cost only as a starting cost for the auction was 11,000, more than 11,000 euro per square meter. An apartment, a building of 19 square meters that have been built in 6 months and never restored in many years. This is something interesting also, because if at the end we compare the cost of construction of those buildings with the cost of nowadays, we have costs that are up to 48, 68% less. But if we compare with the bioarchitecture, green architecture, since the walls of this building are performing very, very well, at that point, we can also say that the cost of this building was up to 73% less than current green architecture. More recently, because someone can say, okay, that is belonging to 100 years ago, maybe it's no longer credible. I took in consideration this interesting social cellar that has been realized in Gorizia, north of Italy, where the construction doesn't need any centering to be built. Every square, the room is made of a series of square spaces vaulted with the sail vaults. And every space is 6 by 6 meters. And since it doesn't need any centering, it has been built by one person alone, with the collaboration of one guy that was passing the bricks one by one. And the time needed for the construction was 1 week per space. And so per space. And so the construction of this building, which is 648 square meters, took only 18 weeks. And if we simply take in consideration the cost of labor, even taking the one of Milan, that is the highest in Rome, in Italy, we discovered that the labor cost of this fantastic wine cellar was only 45,000 euros. And again, this is something on which we have to think about. And the same artist, the same mason, built this museum of war in Gorizia with a different kind of walls, but with the same system and with the same very contained cost. It's interesting also that if we take in consideration books that are not written after, some ideology, and these are books not written by architects, this is a book written by two experts of thermoeconomy, we discover that traditional walls are behaving better than a modern wall with the hollow bricks, and they don't create a risk, or rarely they create a risk of condensation inside the wall. But there is something more to be taken in consideration, because someone can say, okay, in the 21st century, we can build in a different techniques than the reinforced concrete because of seismic reason. And then nobody knows that in 2013, it was some great experiment made in Italy, an international committee of seismic engineer decided to build the model design in the manual of the Bourbon, the manual the seismic construction of the Bourbon, and that is called Casa Baracata Borbonica, and they emulate some earthquake never tested, and the building remained perfectly standing. And so they said that this system that is based on the ancient Roman Opus Craticium has to be considered the more solid, the most safer in seismic construction. Obviously, no one school of architecture of engineer has imposed this methodology of construction in their school, at least the teaching of this. It's interesting that this technique, well documented by the Bourbon in this manual, it's possible to be found all around the world, wherever there is a timber structure. If we think about the Pumbalin house in Portugal, or those houses that are possible to be seen in Normandy, or those in Turkey, or the Tudor architecture in England, they are always based on this kind of technique. But obviously, this is not making interest for the industry of concrete. So if we want to change the situation, if we want to have something that is more sustainable, or as I said, inheritable, we have to do something that has to be forever, and is not something that appears sustainable for a while, whose bill will be paid by our children and grandchildren. And so probably the first thing we can do is to recompact the cities, give back countryside to countryside, and improve the life of people, and reduce the consumption of land, and reduce also the consumption of energy, making buildings with more sustainable techniques. And then we can start from the complaint of Giolitti was saying, he was complaining because the land, the municipality didn't purchase the land to make the investments. Because as I said, if we watch the city we inherited as a glass that is half full, those houses, those cities are, as I shown you from the satellite picture I shown earlier, are plenty of voids, and all these voids are belonging to the state, are already belonging to the domain. So instead of building in the middle of nowhere, far from the center, probably we can start filling the voids in order to recompact the city. Then since the dream of the inhabitants of Corviale, since 2001, when it was organized as some kind of referendum, they asked to have something similar to Garbatella, I made a proposal to show how their district could be changed. This is the plan of nowadays of Corviale, and as you can see, there are a lot of voids. So We have to consider when we make this project that we can destroy the social life of those living there. So we have to keep them as possible, as much as possible on the same side. So what we can do is to fill the voids with the first block. When these are ready, it's possible to demolish and move the inhabitants. And step by step, we can arrive to the creation of a borgo. This borgo, it's something that is not only the design of the building, but especially the design of the void, the design of the straw. So in this diagram, I shown how in a place that has no places for gathering people, we can have 5 piazzette along the main spine. We can have a lot of courtyard permeable like those of all the districts built at the beginning of the 20th century, as those of Garbatella the inhabitants were asking for. And we can have a city that is in any case also taking care about the vehicular circulation. With the brown, you can see the vehicular circulation to enter, leave your goods, download, upload, whatever you like, and then disappear. And in orange, you can have the circulation, the main circulation. Here you can see the location of parking lot enough for all these inhabitants under the ground. Here in red, you can see the location of the shops. Instead of having a shopping mall in the middle of nowhere, you can have an equal distribution of shops along the main stroll, while in the secondary street, the dark brown shows the possible location of the workshop, since many of the inhabitants of Corviale are artisans that wants to have their activity under their feet. This is in the division, the differentiation of the green with the olive green above, that is the countryside. The dark green below is a new park. The light green are these semi-private courtyard where you can have the passage of people, and the dark green in the outskirts of this village are the private garden for the backyard for special houses. And then there is an equal distribution of public buildings inside the entire district instead of concentrating everything in somewhere. So you have starting from right, some post office, bank, then you have the market piazza with the market lodge and the church. And then you have the other large red building is an elementary and kindergarten school with sport activities inside. When the school is closed, the basket court, volleyball court could be used by the kids of the district. In front of that, there is the town hall with the police station. In the next piazza, you have the middle school, the high school, and a library, and the schools are hosting other sport activities to be used by the inhabitants of the city when the schools are closed. And at the end, you have in the piazza a movie theater. These are differently all the res privata, the public mixed, private mixed use, mixed income buildings, and only the overlapping of res publica and res privata generate the civitas, which is the new borgo. I made an evaluation of the cubic meters to be built for public building and for the private building. And then these were useful to understand how many inhabitants also we can put. So we have an increment of 1,500 inhabitants, 2,000 of inhabitants, which means that we can have more houses for sale to zero the cost of construction of the houses to rent. And at the end, it's also possible to see that the present Corviale land consumption is almost 30 hectares, while in the future will be only 18. So a lot of land is given back to the countryside. The courtyard are inspired to those of the social housing I mentioned earlier, according to the will of the inhabitants. And this is these are series of pictures of a courtyard of a beautiful district. And as you can see here, still today, kids are playing in quarter like the one in Garbatella in the playgrounds that were designed to be playground from the very beginning. So probably these are the last kids that are lucky and they can play on the air instead of in front of some laptop or PlayStation. These are quick views I made. This is a view toward the school from the municipality, the piazza. This is the opposite view from the school to the municipal building. This is a view of one of the courtyard nearby that piazza. And you can see inside the location of the playgrounds, inside the gardens. This is an infilade from the market piazza to the piazza of the church. And you can see the courtyard inside with the playground for children under the trees. This is a view at the street level of the Market Loggia. This is the opposite side of the Market Loggia near the church. And this is an example of the edges of the district along the park with the wall that is separating the private courtyard, semi-private because must be permeable. And this is a view toward the movie theater piazza with the architecture that obviously is inspired to the one the inhabitants were asking for. I made an evaluation of the cost of construction of this building according to the costs that are the data that are offered to all the architects by the Association of the Architects. And I don't want again to give you all these numbers, but what is interesting to be noticed is at the end, considering the cost necessary for the demolition, the cost of construction is an investment of also $500 million of lira. But at the end, what is interesting is that when we consider all the shops, the houses, and the special activities, the garages that can be sold, even with the costs that are lower than those of the local real estate, at the end, instead of having public costs, we have a public profit of 589 millions of euro possible to be invested for a similar intervention in another neglected district. The success of this project and the award received brought me to Palermo, where a group of inhabitants of the Zen, which is this dangerous, terrible district designed by Vittorio Gregotti, asked me, they made a kind of, they self-taxes themselves to give me some symbolic reimbursement to check if some similar project was possible to be done. And I accepted the challenge, and it was really much more the social challenge because this symbolic reimbursement was less than symbolic, but to me, the social message was powerful. This is the present district. These are images of this horrible jail-like district. And this is what we can do because these are the Space Invaders plans designed by Vittorio Gregotti. Even here, there are a lot of voids, and it's possible even here to fill step by step, demolish, and then step by step, it's possible to arrive to a borgo, as you can see here, with a large buffer zone because there is a highway running around that was built for the 1990 football world championship that was in Italy. And so in order to have a buffer zone, this is a park where people can make a jogging, can bike, can run, can do whatever they like. And there are a lot of sport activities in the northern part and the southern part because these are requested by the inhabitants because they thought the importance of investing a lot on sports to keep the kids away from the tentacles of the mafia. This is the present Zen, and this is what would be in the future with the reopening or the reconnection with the rest of the city because actually it's totally isolated. This was a study of the pedestrian circulation. This was a dimensioning of the 10-minute walk city, as you can see. And also all the main street were dimensioned in terms of kilometers, but also in meters, but also in terms of minutes. And as you can see, everything is dimensioned on the human scale. By the way, the yellow street is something where the inhabitants who are working a lot on the daily markets, street markets in the center of Palermo, ask to have also in their district a street market like those characterizing the center of Palermo. This is a diagram of the 2-minute walk distance from each piazza, piazzetta, in order to create a rhythm. These are in yellow the spaces for gathering kids together. And then those darker are the places where you can have spaces for elders inside the courtyards. These are the schools necessary for a city. Actually, this is a district where actually are living 16,000 of inhabitants. In my proposal, they can be 21, almost 22,000 of inhabitants. This is the system of the sport I mentioned earlier. These are more in details, the sport complexes, the southern one and the northern one. And this is the distribution in red of the shops along the main stroll. In dark are the workshops with the same idea of Corviale for the same needs. This is the daily street market plan. As you can see, these are the green spaces, even in this case with the permeable courtyard, which are characterizing also the center of Palermo, even in the medieval part of Palermo. These are all the public building equally distributed in the city in order to avoid the concentration, which at the end becomes some dead zone. These are the houses, and this is the civitas, even in this case. This was the evaluation of the volumes and surfaces of the design in order to understand also the number of inhabitants. And even in this case, this is bringing to profit of 255 millions of euros possible to be invested to improve another district in the outskirts. In addition to this profit, considering the possibility of having some monthly fee paid for social housing, of, let's say, 300 euro per apartment, is possible to gain 8 millions, almost 9 millions of euros per year, which are costs that are possible to be taken in consideration for maintenance work or whatever you need or for other works. But this is the very sad, horrible condition of the piazza that is on the other side of the current church that looks like a bunker. And in my proposal, according to my discussion I had also with the parish of the present church, I propose to reorient the church on the other side with the character of Palermo. And this is the way I propose to transform that place. You can see the mountains on the backside are the same, but this will be the new church of San Filippo Neri. And then you can have a kind of architecture that obviously is far away from the one you have seen for the project of Rome, because one of the major aspects of urban design, architectural design, is to design the sense of belonging. So the respect of local tradition, the respect of local habits, the respect of local character is fundamentally important. And this is a view of the piazza of the daily market, and this is a view from above of the piazza of the daily market with the beginning of the street with the street market. So thank you very much. And now I think I'm perfect in time in 1 hour, and we can open the debate. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Ettore. So many interesting ideas, a bit depressing in the beginning, but I'm happy you ended in a more optimistic key. So we are starting now the questions and answers. If you have any questions, please type them. I see there are 3 messages, but that was about appreciation. So please type your questions, and then I will ask you to unmute your microphone and ask directly. So any questions? Until you think about the questions, I will start with a question of mine. I like very much the successful story of Garbatella, and as I remember, if I remember well, it was also like a school of building. It was done by the future inhabitants. Am I right, Ettore?
That is the story of Testaccio, not the one of
Testaccio in
Garbatella,
this
yes.
case.
But at the end, Testaccio is the starting point because it was this terrible situation, very similar to the one experienced in Paris in 2005. Rome had exactly the same situation in 1905, so 1 century earlier. And the violence was absolutely crazy. The Pope was kicked out, throwing stone against him. And a proto-sociologist called Domenico Rano moved and lived for 5 years in the district to understand what was wrong. And he created a committee for the moral and economic improvement of Testaccio, which were collecting together people of any kind of social classes, religious belief and political belief, etc. And they were all concentrated on the problems of the urban and architecture of Testaccio. And also in order to solve the problem of the bankruptcy of the Istituto per le Case Popolari and the Comune, they created an incredible strategy, a policy that was making the Istituto Case Popolare, some firm that were working in competition with the private investors. And so they created a system of cooperative that were controlled by the state, by the Unione Edilizia Nazionale, and they were a cooperative of workers that were the future inhabitants of the district. And the quality changed so drastically that the violence disappeared. And in 1917, the Istituto Case Popolari, recognizing the success of that intervention, the achievement of those days, they invented the slogan La Casa Sana ed Educatrice, the healthy and educational home, because they recognize the educational role played by architecture in the way those people were behaving. Obviously, when you develop the sense of belonging, people are proud of the place where they live. No one is proud to say, I'm living in Corviale today.
That's fantastic. And you think this can be repeated today to have a neighborhood built by the inhabitants, like a training center?
The Latin said, nihil difficile volenti, nothing is difficult if you want. It's a question of willing. And so if politicians are smart enough to make at least a pilot project and start with this, they can do it. The problem today is not that much in the politicians, because at the end they believe in their advisors, is not much in the citizens, but is mainly a problem of the academia. Because what is absurd is that my projects for Corviale and Zen have been awarded abroad, have become a model of development abroad in some country. I was invited even in Brazil to show to the responsible of Mia Casa Mia Vida, which is the social housing program in Brazil, the methodology to do it. But here in Italy, the great problem is that the university doesn't want the demolition, the substitution of buildings like this, because they were designed by famous architects. So they don't care about the quality of life of those living there, but they defend the buildings, because at the end, all the professors are authors of all these suburbia, because no one of these immense suburbias all around in Italy, no one of these are not being designed by professor of La Sapienza or professor of Milan or professor of Naples or professors of whatever kind of university. So they consider this building as a part of their body, even if they don't live there. So it seems like you allowed someone to cut your arm. And at the end, they stop any possibility because the next one could be one of them. And so when we started the debate on Corviale, it was a proposal to put a protection to insert Corviale among the listed buildings. And this is absolutely crazy because the quality of the life there is more than terrible.
Yes, we start having, thank you very much for the answer. We are having now a lot of questions. Ricardo, if you would like to unmute your microphone and ask directly your question. Can you, Ricardo?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please ask.
I wanted to ask how the traditional masonry is competitive with contemporary building techniques in terms of time, building time.
Yes, the data I shown you are taken directly from the real documents of construction. And so, for instance, when you build when you build an arch, in bricks. You have to the workers says un arco deve essere armato e disarmato immediatamente. An arch must be armed and disarmed immediately, because you have to test immediately after putting the keystone if movements are happening. If movements are not happening, and obviously this is also for the vault, you can load it. You don't have to wait any time. While, for instance, reinforced concrete need 8 days to have a solidification of the exterior and 28 for the interior. So you need to have all this forest of posts and the floor, and then you can do something above, but obviously not that much. The vault system I shown you, the one in Gorizia, it is something that doesn't need any wooden structure for the centering, because it's built with this technique that has been developed well, it was well known, well developed at the beginning of, at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, but obviously we have examples that are dating back much more. And this is something that it is based on the experience of putting the bricks in such a manner that is working as a support for the next level. And even in that case, when that is done, you can load it. But there is one other thing quite interesting, because if we consider the modern concrete and the ancient concrete, there are a quite different situation. A few years ago, I was involved in a documentary of the BBC Two, you can find online, that is called Rome Invisible City. And I was talking about the construction of the Dome of the Pantheon, but I also suggested the responsible of the BBC, since those involved in the documentary obviously were not the main documentaries. We were just interviewed, because at the end the show was made by the journalists. So I gave the journalists all the instruction and all the suggestions to do something quite interesting. We built one block of Roman concrete. We made a wooden box. We put it under the water, the wooden box. We throw the mortar of Roman mortar, so only lime and pozzolana sand, which is this volcanic sand that has a binding property and has the same kind of salts that are inside the modern concrete, but are naturally made. And after 36 hours, we moved the box from the water, we moved the wood from the concrete, and the concrete was, after 36 hours, so solid that this journalist that was 2 meters tall was jumping on the box, and he was not believing in the solidity of this structure. So this is something that is showing that if we want, we can do it. The problem is how much current industry can allow the production of artisans, the production of materials that are natural and are not produced in immense kiln and whatever we like. What is 0 kilometers is not interesting for these big corporations that are producing materials far away. For instance, when Richard Mayer built his a ridiculous museum for the Apaches in Rome, he did something that was some concrete that was purchased in Germany. Sorry, I have to take the cable because my computer is dying. Just a second.
And also we have a lot of questions waiting.
Sorry. Okay, safe.
So we have a lot of other questions. If
Yes.
we can shorten up this answer, it's very interesting, but we have another 4 or 5 questions. So the conclusion is if you want, you can. Only to be allowed
Well,
by
for my
authorities.
colleague Thomas Albrecht,
Yes,
I can say
Thomas.
that the cost per square meters are those that are documented by year by year by the Association of the Architects per region, because are different, those in Rome from those in Palermo, for instance. That's why there were different costs, different profits in these two projects. And it's something that is easy to be found also online. We, as an architect, we are receiving every year from the Association of the Architect these data, which are calculated on the average cost of public constructions made in the region.
Christian Fernandez, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question?
I think Thomas was first.
Thomas was answered.
Yeah, I answered to the question
sorry.
of Thomas that was about the building costs
Sorry.
of construction. Yes.
I got up for a second. I didn't hear that. I just wanted to ask that how in my country we don't have any kind of traditional, classical traditional ways of building. Modernism is everything that has defined architecture in the Dominican Republic. So how would you even start the conversation with an investor or the government in places like mine to develop something so unconventional for what will be popular wisdom and all the things that the market dictates in countries like mine?
Well, first of all, any country on this planet has a tradition. Sometime is still there, sometime has been wiped out because of the investment, the development made after Second World War, especially. So I think it's possible to look in libraries, in archives, to understand what used to be the original character of places. All these marvelous countries that were part of the Spanish domain used to have a spectacular character that probably is lost now. I don't know the specific case. So I think it will be useful to watch at our back to see what were the local tradition, what were the roots, if we want to recover these things. And if we really don't have anything and you have to scratch from zero, the best thing to do is to watch at examples that are successful abroad. I remember the presentation of the mayor of a friend of mine, the mayor of Carmel in Indiana, when he shown the ugliness of Carmel, Indiana, before the intervention he promoted. His presentation was starting with a series of pictures of Paris, of Rome, of London, marvelous places all around the world. And he was saying, this is not Carmel, Indiana, this is not Carmel, Indiana. And then he started showing the horrible, monotonous, flat land only with the corn and horrible suburbia that used to characterize Carmel, Indiana. And so he said we decided to invest on beauty, to invest on quality. And so he engaged this incredible development of the city that in 2014, as I remember, if I don't remember wrongly, the Forbes published an article defining Carmel, Indiana, one of the best places to live in 2014 in the United States, thanks to this incredible transformation that was bringing back this city that was designed only for cars in a city that was much more at a human scale. Obviously, the model for the architecture were not indigenous. There is a theater that looks like a Palladian theater, but in a place that has to scratch from zero, at that point, one can decide what would be the best way to do it. In any case, what is necessary to do is to define the sense of belonging and continuing with the construction with this kind of international style, or worse than the international style, that is making the world flat. It's something that is not stimulating any sense of belonging. And without a sense of belonging, people are going away.
Thank you very much, Jan. If you would like to ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very interesting, hopefully look into the future. I have a sort of a thought that over the last 2 centuries, we have been concerned with housing an ever larger populations. Our cities grow and grow outwards. Maybe that's about to change, you know, given the low birth rates, especially in Italy. Will this problem sort itself out in the end? Because given the smaller population, will people kind of retreat back to the, you know, historic cores, and in a sense kind of rediscover them for the beautiful places they are, and actually then we might find our sort of cities in 100 years' time are beautiful in the center and surrounded by a swamp of decaying concrete around the outside. You know, I don't know whether that's a good thing to end up with or not, but you know, is that a possibility?
I think so, absolutely, because obviously this is probably a very credible perspective. In any case, we have to think about the way we have made urbanism in the last 200 years, as you said, especially in the last 100 years, because it's true that after the second industrial revolution, it was a great explosion in some place of urbanism. But it's also true that until the theories of the 20th century, until the advent of cars and the power of oil industry and car industry, cities were still maintaining some dimension that were credible, and development was made on real needs. And if I compare, and this is something I well documented in the books I publish, I shown the cover earlier. I was really puzzling when, because when I was a student, I remember that my professor were always talking about numbers and hypotheses of growth to developed cities, with the percentages that were never demonstrated correct, were just a justification for speculators to make a massive investment. And I was puzzled because when I analyzed the case of Rome, because I fell in love with the architecture of the earliest 20th century and all these studies I made, I discovered that the city that was before the unification of Italy was 160,000 inhabitants, 165,000 of inhabitants. In let's say 70 years, become a city of 1,200,000 of inhabitants. But the quality of construction was incredible. The time invested for the construction was incredible, and everything was perfectly matching the real needs of those people on those days. So I'm wondering why, in the quality of the cities, the quality of the architecture, in the worst moment of people looking for a house is so good, and the quality of houses and urbanism in a place that, in a period where only numbers of hypothetical growth are used is so bad. Obviously, the answer is that something was based on craftsmanship and the other one was based on industry and on private interests. So today, I think we need to be honest enough, especially in the schools of architecture, because at the end, the problem starts inside the school of architecture that are making the theory, because politicians are not experts, are trusting their counselors, and their counselors were, the advisor were professors probably of the university. And if we still continuing in the trend of teaching urbanism according to the standard, according to the numbers, according to Le Corbusier theory, we will never change the world. We need to be honest enough and say, okay, we don't want to blame anybody. They made an attempt, but they failed. Now it's necessary to restart. And instead of reinventing the wheel, we have to simply watch at the back and see if something was successful.
Very, very true. Thomas, would you like to ask your question?
Sorry, you were on mute for most of that. Do you want me to ask my question?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So, given that all the great cities that we know and love, like Paris, London, Amsterdam, Lisbon, Rome, etc., if you look at the buildings that were built, say, before 1920, you have a city that has a sort of a uniform height limit. And that limit was largely made by technology, because you couldn't really build buildings more than 10 stories tall. And people, before the invention of the elevator, people didn't want to walk up that many stairs anyway. Given that today you can build a building 200 stories tall, and property developers would make an enormous profit if they owned a really beautiful Portland stone building with lovely carvings on the outside, but they wanted to put a 200-story building there. How, if you don't have a zoning-based planning system, can you actually stop property developers from building skyscrapers everywhere and demolishing the fabric of the really nice cities? Now, most people believe that most of these buildings are actually heritage listed, but actually very few of, say, the 19th century apartment buildings in London or the early 20th century office buildings in London are actually listed. But they're actually being demolished at quite a rapid rate, because it's very profitable to just knock down a beautiful 10-story building and pop up a skyscraper. So what's your real solution for that?
Actually, in Italy, we are suffering the same problem, especially because of laws that are inventing theory to justify these things. For instance, the European instruction for the seismic and energetic improvement of buildings allow, with the local laws, regional laws, like Legge Regionale number 7 of Regione Lazio, they decided that it is possible to demolish a building because you need to improve the seismic behavior, even if these are buildings that survive on many earthquakes in the past. But when they invent theory, they invent a theory to make, to scare people. And those without any education, they maybe believe in these things. But at the end, the only reason why they made this was because the historical district, the historical zones, and even those of the earliest 20th century are extremely beautiful, are much more profitable in terms of real estate than the outskirts. So those that build the horrible outskirts now want to make investment in district where they can sell not the property, but the view from their property. And this is why there are a lot of institutions like the one I'm member of, that is Italia Nostra, but in Europe we have also Europa Nostra, that are fighting, are trying to prevent these things. But we need to have people with enough courage to say stop. Also, because if we really want to believe in sustainability, the skyscraper is the super unsustainable technique. And also the invention that the skyscraper is saving land is completely not true. Because if you want to have a skyscraper working, you need to have a lot of land for streets and a lot of land for parking lots, which means that you are making some incredible land consumption for some super unsustainable kind of city. There is an interesting example you should take a look, which is, I think you all are familiar with the district, Le Plessis-Robinson in Paris. Are you? Do you know this district?
So what was the name of that
Le
district?
Plessis-Robinson. Anyway, it's a fantastic district that was made tearing down a monster district, very similar to the Zen I mentioned, when in 1989, the mayor had the courage to say, okay, let's destroy that. At the beginning, it was also the idea of making their skyscrapers and other stuff like that, but was not the intention of of the mayor. And then it was well demonstrated that the kind of intervention that has been done with the buildings that are not exceeding the 6 stories, with a lot of green and wonderful character that is emulating the one in the historical center of Paris, is so good that the investment was much more profitable if they would have built the skyscraper. There are several essays you can read online. The master plan was made by François Sporry, and then the project was made by Mark and Ada Brightman and Xavier Ball. They did a fantastic job. It's one of the greatest kind of new urban intervention ever done, which become a model. Now, I guess that 35% of houses there are social housing. You can recognize those that are social housing and those that are wealthy apartment. And it was such a success in terms of social costs, in terms of economic, instead of environment, instead of anything, that the Disney understood the business, and now it is building the new district, Val d'Europe, which is a new town for 100,000 of inhabitants that is directly inspired from the model of Le Plessis-Robinson.
How do you spell that?
Lelpisalsibinson.
Oh, great. I found that. Thank you.
Welcome. And then you can see also Val d'Europe that is going on now with all traditional buildings that looks like the center of Paris. Yes.
Yes, we have a few architects from TAG who are working on this, like Stanhope Gate Architecture. They
Exactly.
have their section, and probably we will present this Parisian complex in one of our next talk if this is so instrumental. Thank you so much. The next question is from Stefan. Stefan, can you unmute your microphone, please?
Good evening. First of all, I want to congratulate you for your incredible work and presentation. As you can see, I have multiple connected questions gathered in one paragraph, and I know you have already talked about a few of those aspects. From your experience, how receptive and open are the administration and investors to such proposals, and what would be your realistic predictions regarding the change for the better in these preferences, and how attractive and profitable it could be for a young architect who would like to adopt similar approach to urban planning and housing?
Well, as I said earlier, it's a question of willing something. For instance, for the project of the Zen, I think there is a microphone that is open.
Alessandra.
There is some microphone that is open. So when I made the project for the Zen in Palermo, which was a great success, the first presentation was a great success. I realized that someone took advantage of this for a political reason. In the period of electoring, many different parties were trying to take that project as the flag to win the elections. And unfortunately, as I said, there is the university that is fighting against that idea. But I remember that the mayor of Palermo sent to Rome his counselor for urbanism because they were very interested to develop that project. Then another member of the local politicians who led the group that is called Accademia della Politica he invited me to make another conference on that, and then another one. And at the end, you have politicians from all the parties that were claiming to be the great promoter of this idea, which was never implemented because of other reasons. Because, as I said, the politicians are following the suggestion of their advisor obviously are following also the interest of the speculators. So sometimes the big problem is the conflict with all these figures that are turning around. And it's also a question of finding the courage to do something as a pilot project. Many years ago, I participated to an architectural contest in Rome that was called Quartiere Rinascimento. When I read the title, I said, okay, this is the competition I have to take part. And then I discovered that it was promoting anything that any Renaissance, and it was promoting horrible buildings. So I decided to participate to make a polemics. And I revisited the master plan made by the promoter, which was one of the biggest developer of Rome. And instead of designing only the building, I redesigned, following the footprint they gave, I redesigned the district. And the interesting thing was that my panels were used as welcoming people to the great exhibition that was made in Istituto San Michele, which is the headquarters of the Sovrintendenza in Rome, the Sovrintendenza di Stato of the whole country. And the owner of the firm that promoted this competition invited me to go to their headquarters. So I got I received the honorable mention, not the award. And then they explained me that they gave me the honorable mention because giving me the prize would have mean to build the building. But since they never seen such a kind of architecture, they were a bit afraid of the possible cost, the possible investment. I was a bit young on those days, so I was not expert of the real costs of construction. And so I had no answer. I say, we have to make an attempt. Anyway, there are examples that are showing that this is something that is going on all around the world. And so the project was not done for that specific reason. But even in this case, what is interesting is that this developer told me that the only kind of architecture they were dreaming to build was exactly that one. The only reason they didn't award me because they were not ready to do it. This means that even the worst kind of speculators probably will be in love with intervention like this. And again, one more time, I don't think it's a problem to deal with the politicians, especially if they understand, as the mayor of Le Plessis-Robinson I mentioned it earlier, that at the end they can be elected and re-elected, because he has been re-elected for 30 years and now he's a senator of the Republic of France. He's the one that promoted the law that allow, after the French banlieue, the investment of 60 billions of lira to tear down Monster district and replace it with a district that looks like the center of city. So abroad, this is happening. In Italy, it's not happening yet, but in many other countries, it's happening. And I think it's something that needs to have only the first person that has the courage to do it. And then doing properly, it will be a success. Is undeniable that it will be a success, because all the cases we have all around the world are showing the success of that.
Very interesting. The last question, but which is not really a question, Anne, is this a question or an agreement with what has been said here?
I don't think architects, Anne, the question of Anne.
No. I asked her to unmute.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really hoarse. I've been sick.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not really a question. But I question whether architects even are learning in school how to design using traditional materials. And if they don't understand the materials and they haven't had the engineering, that I don't think architects are even getting today. When I was in school, I had to take engineering every single semester. I don't think architects these days are doing that.
Well, one more time, the problem is the school.
Right.
If the schools are teaching good things, students are learning good things. I'm teaching for the University of Notre Dame, and we are teaching traditional construction, traditional methodologies of construction, not only one way. We are teaching the importance of respecting the local character, the local lexicon, the local tradition, the local materials, in order to do something that is specific for the places. At the end, it's not that difficult, but I understand your question is very true. In 2007, I remember when Rob Creer asked me to bring my student to Brandenburg in the Netherlands, because he designed this new town, and he was desperate because local architects were doing horrible jobs, making a ridiculous, maybe postmodernist architecture, which were far away from any idea of traditional city that was asked by the inhabitants. And so we made this demonstrative project in 1 month with my third year students that were based on the analysis, because what we teach in our school is also the way of making analysis of places and creating the dictionary, the pattern language of places where we work. And I travel in the Brabantine region in the Netherlands with my students, documenting traditional cities with beautiful details, especially in bricks. And in 1 month, we designed 84 houses for 2 large lots they gave us. It was planned as a demonstrative project. And then it was so successful that all the buildings designed by my third year student have been built and sold out immediately from the project. And now is the model to go forward with that project. So I think if we want to change something, we need to start changing the way we are teaching. We need to put apart the ideology that is used in the school in order to understand the importance of these arguments that are fundamentally important for some inheritable future. Until we will be slave on ideology, until we will make a brainwash on student teaching only reinforced concrete, steel, and international style, we have no future.
May I ask you one more question while I have you?
Sure.
What do you think the role of the construction material industry plays? Because we know that you can't go to, everyone uses Lowe's and Home Depot and the construction businesses that are in their communities, and you cannot find anything in there that's not mass produced from China.
Well, of course, it's a serious problem because, as I said earlier, the industry has such a power that craftsmen cannot fight until there are rules, laws, local laws and rules that are allowing local producers to build with a 0 kilometer architecture and 0 kilometers materials. We have a serious problem in Europe because the European community, with all these instructions which are becoming imposition to countries, is asking to do things presenting as a sustainable, which are unsustainable totally. And so we have buildings, they subsidize those that are making solar panel, photovoltaic panel, wind turbine, or those system of coat on buildings, saying that this is to make the planet better. And my question, discussing with a politician years ago, was, okay, you want to subsidize that, that's fine. But why you don't subsidize in the same manner those that are building in traditional manner, because that is even much more a long-term sustainability than the one you are promoting. And obviously, I realized from the answers that those rules, those impositions are not made for the planet, but are simply a favor given to the corporation, the producer of building materials that are totally unsustainable, even if they claim they are sustainable. I think it is necessary to rediscover the importance of building in traditional masonry. And the only way we can do is starting teaching the way of building, the way of calculating, the way of constructing, producing the materials in the schools of architecture and engineers. Also because earlier I shown these incredible system codified in 1785 by the Bourbon with the Casa Baraccato Borbonica that has been defined by experts of seismic architecture coming from all around the world, the more secure system. And since 2013, when these experiments was made, no one school has imposed the teaching of the Casa Baraccato Borbonica as a seismic construction methodologies.
That's very right. And I've heard recently that it's not only in Italy or Spain where they recognize the importance of this type of structures. There is also a Romanian specialist, Doamna Căsuță, who's an expert on something like that. And the Japanese came to her to look twice to her studies because they didn't believe her in the beginning, but now they are looking back to her research because it seemed that it's really true. So there is a last question from Ali, and then we will wrap it up. Or actually, there are two questions. Christian asked another one, and then Ali, and I think that would be enough for this evening.
I just wanted to ask, for example, in my country, corruption is just in the clear. We are accustomed to that, and in a conference that I went in something that is called Design Week here, pretty well-known architects just said that they had to use the cross section of a crosswalk. They had to make it instead of 25 centimeters that they needed to be functional, they had to go to 40 centimeters because some politician was requiring them to do that because he had money invested in the construction company that will be doing the work, and they needed more concrete all around the project just to pay the fees. And those things happens in some places like where I live. So teaching people the importance of this, of actually designing for the people and taking their places back will be the first step, I guess, for people that live in situations like mine, because corruption will not let you propose some things that will be the correct way to do the projects.
Corruption is all around the world. In Italy, we are expert, genius of that. But I think anything we do, anything we build is a consequence of the way also those that are making the design present the project. Many times in the schools of architecture, even in the best schools of architecture, the work of the architect is limited, the work of the student in this case. It is limited to the very design. Sometimes it's just the design of the facade. Sometimes it's the design of a plan without thinking at the internal functions. At the end, is a merely exercise of drawing rather than a real design. And at the end, we are forming future architects that needs to learn their practice after the graduation, working sometimes as slaves in some place where they can learn what the school didn't taught them. And this is a crime, I think, because as professors, our duty is to teach the students anything they have to learn. This means that when I ask my students to make a project, the project is not limited to the design of a building. They start with the analysis of the places where they have to make the design to understand what is the character, but they need to also understand what is necessary for the place where they have to make the design, understanding the social condition, the urban condition, the lack of functions, etc. Then they have to make the urban design. From the urban design, and I always invite local people, the future consumers of the product of the students, to understand, also for the student to understand how important is the dialogue with the people, the involvement, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, of people, in order to do something that is not going to be accepted as an imposition by those living there, but as something that is really the consequence of shared ideas. And the project has to cover also the architectural design. They have to design all the rooms. They have to understand how to divide an apartment properly, for instance, if they design a residential building. And at the end of the project, I ask also them to make some business plan to understand, to balance the cost of construction and the future income from the market, the real estate that we can have. When they design a building, they need to understand that the building is not just a facade, but they need to understand the importance of framing views to give extra value to some apartment, in order to organize from the very design the real estate process, because at the end our client must be happy to work with ours, and they need to understand, because they need to have also the right way of presenting the project in order to show not only with the drawings but also with the words, which are not abused words like the abuse of the word sustainability, but are the words that are describing all the narrative, but all the thought that are behind and beyond the design that is presented on the boards. If the schools make this everywhere on this planet, the future generation of the architect will be the right one to work as advisor of those decision makers. Because at the end, for a builder to build an ugly building on a beautiful building, it's the same. They are just thinking at the business. So the aesthetic of the building, the social reverberation of an intervention is our task. It's not the task of those that are making the investment or those that are approving the project. The responsibility is only ours, and more than ours is the one of those that are forming ours, which are the schools of architecture.
Thank you. That was extremely important to understand that the architect has really duty. It's not there just to show his ego, but there is a lot of responsibility behind this. We can create, make or break a place. So we have the last question of Thomas, and then we will really close.
I think it was also Ali, no? It was a question
Ali
of Ali.
asked about sustainability. Can you give a short definition?
Well, as I said earlier, sustainability must be something that involves the whole life cycle in the construction. But in reality, for me, it's much more than that. Because this idea of limiting the analysis of what we think is sustainable only on the energy consumption and the carbon footprint is completely wrong, because we need to understand what are the social effects of a design, what are the psychological impact of this, what are the economical impact on local economies. So there are so many parameters to be taken in consideration that what we claim to be sustainable today is totally a lie. It's what we define greenwashing. And so a sustainable thing must be something that is not causing any negative side effects on any aspect around that. That's why we need to think about the cost, not only in the immediate time, but in the long term. I always refer to the way the American indigenous are thinking. Anything they do is evaluated on the base of the 7th generation from now. And anything that we promote as a sustainable today, it is something whose bill will be paid by our children. Alexandra, I think your microphone is on, but yeah. Georgia, I can't hear you. You are muted.
Thomas, in fact, agrees very much with what you said, that the length, how long is the life of a building, counts a lot to sustainability.
Well, the ancient Roman buildings are still here.
So those are the most sustainable.
Yes, I think so. While the, well, one of the most sustainable thing I can say is that the wooden beams of the floors and the roof of Palazzo Farnese are made with the wood that were dismantled from the basilica built by Constantine on St. Peter. And it's wood.
Yes.
So it's a wood that has been made there in the 4th century and now is in another building. I think
And the
that is quite,
quality of materials was better then.
well, it was better because wood was cut with an axe and not with a saw or with the industrial system. So the pores were closed and it were something that was like a monolith. So it's a question of the way we are doing. That's why it's necessary to teach not only the way of building, but also the way of producing properly. If we go to Siberia, there are churches built in the 15th, 16th century, where even the nails are made of wood and are still there in a perfect shape, which means that it's a solid kind of techniques. We need we need at least to know the existence, and then we need to decide, discussing also with our clients what they prefer, is to spend less now and a lot in the future, or spend a little bit more now and zero in the future. The buildings I've shown in San Saba and Garbatella are built in 6 or 4 months and never restored in more than 100 years. The cost of construction was just ridiculous because it was less than 50% of nowadays. The cost of maintenance was zero, and now they are on the real estate market at the same value of precious buildings of the historical center for 11,000 euro per square meter. That's quite sustainable.
Really relevant. So to conclude, the architect has to become again a sort of craftsman. The craftsman and the architect have to come together and share their knowledge and go back somehow in the past by being a more complete designer.
Yes.
Can this be a conclusion?
And the main conclusion is that the schools of architecture all around the world has to put ideology apart.
Yes, indeed. That's why we love Notre Dame.
Thank you.
Because there the truth comes. That's the place from where the truth comes. Thank you so very much to Ettore and also to all the listeners who stay for 2 hours now. Sharp.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon. And here in Rome, maybe you and whoever actually. And I hope to see you all again. And for those that are going to attend the International Making Sleepable Conference in Cortona, I will be happy to meet you all.
Yes, that's always a great joy to meet you and to benefit from so much knowledge. For the others, I would like to tell you that I hope to see you back on October Tag Talk, when we will immerse in the fascinating world of the Middle East stone architecture, listening to Maher Abu Samra from Mass Architectural Design Studio from Jordan. I hope to see you again. So everybody, good night. And again, Ettore, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.